Hello, everybody. So this is Ahmed, and this is the Breakout. Today, I have a special guest with me. Today is Andrey Shcherbenok, our director. Andrey, I'm so happy that having you today, actually, and we are supposed to be talking about people moving to other countries, people moving around the world, right? And I have no clue what your thoughts about this topic.
No, I was just thinking that it's interesting to talk about how you find yourself in a country which is not your own, why you do that, and all the implications that go around it. I mean, it's not so easy just to change the country. I mean, there is something different between changing the city. I mean, people move within their countries, especially if it's a big country.
Yeah.
Not like yours, right? But Russia's pretty big, right? And then in Russia, you can actually travel 1,000 kilometers. You find yourself in the same place, which is what's funny about Russia. I mean, when I first went to Siberia, I was surprised that people are just the same as in St. Petersburg, because I thought, well, it's like they're far away, right? I mean, but no, I mean, you go to Khabarovsk.
Yeah.
But if you cross the border, and if you go from St. Petersburg across the border to, I don't know, Baltic states or to Finland, you find yourself in a very different place, right? So it's not about distance, it's about cultural difference. And I think both of us have traveled, right? Some of us have lived in the foreign countries. Some of us are living in a foreign country. So we might actually, I think, say something interesting about it.
What I actually noticed, for example, the first person I got to know who traveled a lot, who was my dad. Because when I grew up, I was young and I went through his documents and I saw that he has maybe more than 10 passports, and all of them were simply the pages of the passports were filled with stamps. And I was like, what? The longest period that he stayed in Turkey for 3 years, and in Iraq for more than 5 years. And but he told me that after maybe the mid-90s, everything became difficult for us to move, for anybody to move around. It became dangerous. It became like too many questions about moving somewhere. It's not only about the cultural difference, because he always said that I felt like home when I'm traveling anywhere. But for some reason, something happened in the mid-90s that he started to feel uncomfortable staying in a certain place. Even if this place speaks Arabic, it shares the same cultures, it's for more or less, but he felt uncomfortable in this place, and that's why he stopped traveling.
Let's talk about this feeling of being uncomfortable. Have you ever felt uncomfortable in a foreign country?
Well, I would say that at the beginning, but and I also want to draw my personal experience, because I felt that I adapted fast. I adapted quickly, and I had the culture shock. I had this uncomfortable period, and I felt this discomfort itself. But I think that I adapted quickly, and the part of this is because maybe I was already out. I mean, I immigrated in my mind before coming. But other people I see.
Look, I mean, if you talk about so-called internal immigration, right?
Yeah.
So some people live in their own home country, but they feel as if they are not living in a foreign country. But let's say in Russia, there was a whole tradition before people could travel freely in the 70s. I remember I read about a guy who was a fan of New York in America. He lived in a communal apartment in Leningrad, but he had a map of New York Metro, New York subway in his room, right? I mean, he was actually dreaming of going there. And then it was possible to go there. He went there. He completely didn't like it. So all his friends who felt completely at home in Leningrad, they're fine. In the 90s, they went to America. Now they feel fine in America. He was feeling foreign in Leningrad, right? He went to America, he didn't like it, he came back to Leningrad. He was still living in his communal apartment with a map of the New York subway.
Yeah.
So in a sense, when you feel you don't belong here, it may be a sign that, well, it's easy for me to adapt, but it may be a sign that you can never adapt to anything, right? So that it doesn't change, right? You think you could create yourself an imaginary foreign country, you think it's going to be different there, and then you realize you cannot run away from yourself. And maybe even your home country is a more comfortable place to be alone and lonely than a foreign country.
Yeah, and I felt this so much when I went back to Egypt before COVID. I felt so much of comfort. I felt home on a different level. I started to appreciate the things that I was actually doing before I leave even more. And I started to feel like, I asked myself actually the question, why did I leave in the first place? But I think a week afterwards, I was like, no, I wouldn't like to come back to Russia. I'm done. I already sat in the cafe with my friends. I already drank coffee with them. I hanged out with them. I walked the streets with them, and I did all of the things that I was doing, and I felt like home, and I would like to go back. And I felt like I'm started to feel like this, like a little bit inconvenient.
Maybe because it was you were younger, right? I mean, if you compare with my experience, so I went I traveled as a tourist to some countries in the 90s. I think I first went abroad in 1989 even. In 1990, anyway, it was still Soviet Union, and we went to Holland with my mother. But I went to the United States in 2001, and I spent 8 years there. Right, and then I spent 2 more years in the UK. But I was already like 26, 27, I think, when I went. And that means that I could never become an American. So some people say that if you leave to go to do a BA, to do an undergraduate program, you kind of adapt to the country. If you leave to do an MA or PhD, as I did, I was even older than that, then you can never adapt. Then you always be a foreigner. You can live the whole life, but you will never adapt. And you actually, when you look at people, Russian immigrants, for example, in the United States, and many of them actually left in the 90s when they were adults, right? For economic reasons mostly. And so they have a house in California, they work in Silicon Valley, right? They have jobs, but they live completely in Russia, in the sense that they watch Russian TV or they read Russian media. They have Russian friends only, right? And then they never adapt, and that's not your case. And maybe the difference is the age.
Maybe.
Although there is another observation, it depends on the historical time and the country that you live. So some people, another argument goes that, well, no, it's not about the age, it's about the time. So people who live in Soviet Union, for example, and went abroad, they thought, well, we are going for good, right? We are never going to return, it will not be possible. And many of them never returned. That actually, people I had told you about California, they actually like traveling like your dad. I didn't see their passports, but it's probably like that. They traveled everywhere except Russia. So they were in Finland, they were like Lithuania, but they never crossed the border to Moscow from Moscow originally. It's very funny, right? But people who live like in mid-90s or in 2000s, they don't perceive this crossing the border as existential passage. They just go to take a job somewhere. If there is a job in Russia, they come back to Russia. So it becomes not a significant thing.
But why did you actually come back? But I'm not talking about the professional. I'm not asking about the professional.
I'm not. So I don't know what would have happened if I left just after high school, right?
Yeah.
I didn't. But I could never adjust. I could always feel this fucking smell. I'm sorry, can I use these words in the podcast? I mean, this smell of eucalyptus trees in California. It's just, you cannot get used to that. Imagine you live 5 years, right? Every morning you feel the smell of the trees. And I think people who are native there, they just stop noticing that after, several months, and they're fine. I noticed that every day, right? For 5 years. I moved to New York, then it was easier. Because I think the fauna is, flora is actually closer. But I always felt that I have to spend a part of the energy to kind of fight the different environment, to fight the smell, right?
I see.
Metaphorically speaking. And I was getting tired. I think, at least for me, there is a certain capacity. You have a capacity of living in a foreign place. And you exhaust this capacity at a certain point. So by the time my second postdoc in the UK was ending, I just thought that, well, no, I just cannot bear it anymore. I go back to St. Petersburg. So I was just tired, I would say.
I see. Yeah, it's because, but for some reason this, so about for example, the people then who leave, all right, and you are speaking about this capacity to stay, all right. For example, I'm here for about 6 years. And I I don't think that I have been resisting anything.
But married here, right? Why didn't you marry an Egyptian woman?
Because I wasn't there in Egypt. When I grew up,
I'm not here, right?
yeah, also there, right? So yeah, and that's the thing is that I kind of created a life here, right? And I don't think that I have resisted anything. Maybe at the beginning, just to adjust to to technical things, but not the culture, maybe. And
okay, I'll explain how it works for you. Because
yes.
for me, for example, what I found in the States, especially, and because the States and the UK are very different, of course, countries. They speak English. That's the end of their similarities, I would say.
Yeah.
So I think America strikes me as very flat culture. This is why it's very conducive to immigrants, and it accepts immigrants because the level of depth of conversations is not that big, right? So people talk about things where culture doesn't matter. So they talk about their jobs, they talk about the weather, they talk about shopping, they talk about consuming something, they talk about maybe traveling somewhere. And as a result, you can actually talk to someone who comes from China. Okay, right? Cultural difference, immense cultural differences between, let's say, Russia and China don't matter because you don't touch the subjects where it matters. You talk about superficial things. And in a sense, I was kind of missing the ability to talk to people with my own cultural background, where you have the set of references, right? Everybody watched the same cartoons, right? And you can actually bring that up in the conversation, not directly, right? But you have some references, you have some jokes, which is only understood internally, right? All these things. And that makes the depth of the conversation, which you cannot do in a foreign language and with people from a different culture. You didn't experience this kind of thing that, well, people don't know much about what you know coming from Egypt, and you cannot talk with them seriously about important things for that reason.
So I think I was simply acting in a different way. I was having this challenge of that I would like to know more about the Russian culture in order to have this deep conversation and have the cultural references with the Russian people. Because I was like, I cannot simply make them or make anybody watch the TV shows that I watched. Right. Because they are not in English, they are not in Russian, they are in Arabic, and they are in Egyptian dialect. They are never going to be translated. So I cannot have this. So my way is that in order to adapt, in order to have this deep conversation, is that for me to learn. And here is the second thing that I'm saying is that it was this learning challenges that I had, all right, it's just for me. I did this even when I'm thinking about this right now, I did it really unconsciously. It wasn't like, oh, wow, okay, right now I'm sitting down, I'm having this problem with references, and I can't talk with people and they cannot understand me. What can I do? Okay, how about if I learn this and this and that? It wasn't like that. It just, when I'm just thinking about this right now out loud, I think it just happened unconsciously, is that I started to learn instead of forcing others to learn in my own thing. So I was just the one who jumped away. So, and
you learn the language?
Yeah, so this
you can speak Russian.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
You know who's Crocodile Gena?
No.
You see? Never works.
So, so it seems that why then I adapted is that because I jumped away from my room, if we can say that, is that unlike this friend of yours who was living in New York, who was living in Leningrad but has his room as if he lives in New York, I never jumped away. I think I jumped away from them. And yeah, so maybe, but again, it happened unconsciously.
Let's talk about what happens to you when you find yourself, how you develop when you come to a foreign environment. Because I think for me it was also a very developmental experience in a sense.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, some people say, okay, you have to change, right, to adapt, at least to a certain extent. Yeah, you do it to probably, I don't know, 95%, except Crocodile Gena.
Yeah.
I did it to, I don't know, 30%. But you still had to, learn new ways and you develop. But the opposite point of view says, and I think that's what I experienced, is that you stop getting old as soon as you leave your country. because you don't acquire the cultural baggage. That was my experience. So I would spend most of the time in the States, right, and in the UK, but I would come to Russia for the summer. And what happened to me is that for this, I don't know, 9 months, 10 months in the States, I did not grow older. So I left at 27, so I was 27 years old. And then I would come to Russia, and in 2 months, I was rapidly aging, right? I was just, because I mean, you see, you are living a meaningful life, and you're getting experience and getting older, and then you again stop, you freeze. So in a foreign environment, because existentially it's meaningless for you, so you adapt on certain level, but on certain level you kind of isolate. And for that reason, if somebody left, I don't know, his country or her country at the age of 30, now they might be 55, but they're still 30 because they didn't have an opportunity to age.
That's actually very interesting, because I don't know about myself, because I feel like part of what you are saying is not only how you look at yourself. I think how people also look at you. About this, okay, if you stopped at 27, is it because people, when you returned back to Russia, people were treating you as you were in 27, or is it just because you think that you are still 27?
It was an internal feeling, or maybe it was, influenced by other people.
Yeah, because I don't think that I still think that I'm still 20, right? When I lived in Egypt, I still think that. But I think part of this is that because really the people that I lived in Egypt, they are still dealing with me as if I am 20, all right? I don't think it's just an internally because of how I feel. So I feel like I'm 26, all right? But
what about when you're
exactly.
here? So when you are here in Russia, you feel that you are kind of gaining experience and getting older, and you're developing faster than you would otherwise be in Egypt.
Yeah, maybe, all right, maybe, but again, that's it. Developing faster here, I'm not speaking about faster. It's just because you have different set of challenges here, all right? It's not the other one there, all right? You might have other challenges there, like for example, how to then establish a family, how to get acquainted with new friends, find a job, and so on and so forth, all right? But here you have got something like as if you are the baby, all right? And you are going to be learning how to walk by yourself. So it's like bringing back you in time. Maybe that's why actually you stopped at 27, is that because when you went to America, all right, to the States, you had to go to learn how to walk again. So you stopped there, all right, at 27, and you had to go back.
I think I encountered it in a year. What happened there?
Yeah. So you see, like, it's not about walking. It's speaking maybe about how to run, how to do things, all right, how to even talk with people, and so on and so forth. So maybe you were finding your own self by yourself. That's maybe why you felt like your age stopped. Is because you were learning too much about yourself and establishing your own image in this place. But here in Russia, you already established that the 27 years old Andrey, all right, and you had to go back. You went to the States and you had to establish a new Andrey who is 27, but it might be older.
Yeah, but I have this issue with the new Andrey, new Ahmed.
Yeah,
because
it's not the new. I would say the different. I was just saying the different one, the one that was constructed by ourselves.
One thing which is, again, I don't know if it's connected with the country or not connected with the country. So I had two educations, right? I did the kandidatskaya in St. Petersburg before I went to do a PhD in the States. And I must say, University of California, Berkeley is much better than St. Petersburg State University. And if you compare two PhD programs, obviously, right, you can say, in Russia, kandidatskaya program, at least back then, it was just, you didn't go anywhere. You just were supposed to write a dissertation and maybe pass like 3 exams, and you are done, right? And you go through pre-defense, defense and stuff, and you are done. In the States, the integrated PhD program is actually a set of classes, right? You take classes, it's called graduate seminars for 3 years. Right, because it's actually blended with MA. After that, you only start your writing dissertation after 3 years of taking classes. You also teach at the same time, right? So you do all kinds of stuff. So it's much more intense. It was much more difficult for me. But right now, right? How many years? Like 15 years, right after I finished. When I think what influenced my intellectual outlook more I would say St. Petersburg, right? Where I didn't talk much to people. I mean, I read some books. I wrote my first dissertation. Why, right? Is it because I was younger and more receptive, and when I was 27, it was too late to change much, so I stayed pretty much at that stage of my intellectual capacity and didn't move on? Or was it because in your home country, doing something actually makes more difference in terms of influencing you?
You know, I think that
You can compare the same, right? Because you also pretty much did 2 degrees, right? And here.
And here. Actually, let me ask you this. I mean, to answer this question, I think I would ask another question: is that what happens then if you, for example, had your PhD, your study in St. Petersburg, but then you didn't go to California, you went to Vladivostok.
Yeah.
All right. Would you look at St. Petersburg as the same as you are looking at it right now, in the sense is that you didn't leave your country, you are still in your country, you are still simply immersed in your own culture, so you are not looking at your St. Petersburg experience with nostalgia, because I feel like there is some sort of emotion around this. Around this idea is that, well, I remember St. Petersburg. I think it influenced me more. It's because I remember it differently. I think in this way, maybe I'm wrong or whatever. But if I'm in the same country, let's say I studied in Cairo. Okay, I studied in Cairo. What if then after Cairo I went to Alexandria? I don't think that I would remember. I might remember Alexandria in a better way, or I would say, whoa, Alexandria actually influenced me more than Cairo. It's not because of the study there or the intellectual outlook. It's because Alexandria on the sea. It has much more connection with other parts of the world, such as a lot of architecture there in Alexandria looks like the Greek ones because it's simply established by the Greeks. Built
the library was
yes, for example, but still, right? The entire outlook of the city simply different. Maybe I will remember Alexandria differently. But I don't think that it will be, I will look at it and then say, well, maybe the intellectual outlook, it changed. It influenced me. So I wouldn't say like Alexandria's influenced my intellectual outlook. I'm still in my home country. I'm still here. I'm not, but if I go then, let's say to Russia then, all right, maybe I will remember Cairo. And I'm still I started right now to remember my Cairo experience, despite the fact that I didn't think back at the time when I left it, all right, that it changed me at all. But when I look at it right now, I'm like, actually, it influences me a lot. But is it because of how I remember it? All right. So I think that there is some sort of nostalgia.
It's a perception thing.
I think it's a perception.
So actually, if you read my paper, so I was actually interested by Berkeley.
Yes, exactly, actually.
Yeah, maybe it's true. I just was thinking that I cannot compare it to graduate programs because I also did undergrad in St. Petersburg State. And I always reminded by that every time I walk at night, in the evening, is because what the nightlife in Cairo is just something fascinating. I'm always nostalgic to that, and I'm always nostalgic to that when I can't do it here. So I'm like, you can do nightlife here.
Yeah.
Why not?
Because in Cairo you can walk at 2 a.m. And you will find all shops, all people who are selling stuff on the streets.
Okay, let me tell you something about that before I forget. So I lived for 5 years. I lived in Berkeley. San Francisco Bay Area usually dies at 9 p.m. 9 p.m. everything is closed. All shops are closed, all coffees are closed. There are some nightclubs, but you cannot see them. You have to know, well, there is this door where you can actually, maybe there is all night through concerts or something like that, or a bar. But the streets are empty. At Berkeley especially, it's like a village, right? So everything is closed. I was after St. Petersburg, of course it was. And then I moved to New York to do a postdoc at Columbia. And I lived on Broadway, actually, on Manhattan. And I had a newsstand which was open 24 hours. So I was coming from my office, which I sometimes stayed until, 2 in the morning. I was crossing the Broadway and I saw this newsstand which was selling newspapers, like at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I was ecstatic, right? I felt so great that it exists, although it's not that I took part actively in that nightlife, But the thing that the city is living 24/7, somehow, yeah, it was very pleasant.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what I'm saying is that, for example, so I never went to shops at late night in Egypt, but I I simply passed by these shops when I'm walking up in Cairo with my friends. I always snagged when I'm walking alone, simply at the streets with my friends. Why? Because there are these people who are standing selling snacks on the streets. And you can buy anything. You can find other people walking with their friends, talking with each other.
So this is what you missed.
This is what this is what I am always being remembered of. And actually I liked so much this thought about the fact that it might be passive aggressive, is that I remember it because when I hate that I can't do that here. Even St. Petersburg, when we go, for example, simply during City as a Text, I still, it reminds me of that. But I do it, but it makes me sad here. So I feel like nostalgia can be the drive to become angry and become maybe aggressive, all right? But also it can be the aggressor of making you sad, right? Or making you simply a little bit disappointed or something like that. Because when I do it then, but it's not with my friends, it's not with the people that I used to do it.
It's fake.
Exactly.
It's a fake.
It's a fake, yes. And that's
Let's go into a restaurant with a woman in the States. It's a fake. Because you eat, you talk about your studies, right? You're fellow graduate student.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. There is no undercurrent. Right? In Russia, there is undercurrent. There's kind of romantic. If there's no romantic relationship, even, I mean, still there is something, right? Nothing, right? You feel like, well, it's a fake dinner.
Yes.
Fake lunch, right? So,
but they
talking about the depth.
Yes, but here is the interesting part: is that in St. Petersburg, I don't even get sad, not only because I'm not with my friends who are in Cairo, for example, and we used to do this, and right now I'm doing completely building a new memory, all right? But I also feel sad because I'm not in Tumen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why I'm not there? I'm not in Tumen. Why I'm not in Tumen right now, walking alone, all right? And there is nothing open. Why there is some life here? Why I'm not there? And I feel another type of sadness. And that's why I really like this idea about this passive aggressive. But I think it's I think it might be also the aggressive here, the nostalgia part. So in some ways.
One thing I wanted to just mention, because I think it might be interesting for people, is that I mentioned that the United States is very different from the UK.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the main difference is that America is a country of immigrants. For that reason, there is a pressure on everybody become an American. Yeah. Because you can. Mm-hmm. You can come from China, from Russia, from Europe, from Mexico, and become American. Of course, you will have your own food preferences, right? I mean, there is this kind of, they will always celebrate, you have different tastes or whatever, but you will be an American. Mm-hmm. In the UK, in England, you can never become British. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. If you're not born there, you will always be a foreigner. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, there is no pressure. Mm-hmm. So strangely enough, you feel more free in London than in New York, because you clearly do not belong to this British society. You can admire a British sense of humor, but it's difficult to really practice it, right, if you are not from there, etc. So, and for that reason, you feel fine, right? Because nobody tells you, okay, become a Brit, finally, because you will not. What do you think about Russia in this regard? Do you think that Russia has a pressure of you to finally assimilate 100% and not being much different than someone coming from, I don't know, the Caucasus, or that looks different, right, from most Russians, but still it's completely Russian. Do you have this pressure? Or do you think, well, I will never be completely Russian, there is no pressure for that reason because I don't belong here and everybody knows that?
It's a really difficult question because I don't think that I have like a general opinion about this issue. It might be because the environment I'm in, right? I feel welcomed. I feel simply simply cultured by the place that I am in. I feel like I'm assimilated. I feel like I'm just okay. The way I am, it's okay to be here, to have to have simply this conversation, to have anything, to just live and do anything you would like to do. You don't have to be Russian, right? In order to simply, yeah, now we accept you or something like that, right? I don't have to do anything, to prove anything to anybody in order just because I'm not Russian. No, I feel like I'm really welcomed, and this is part of this. This is really what makes me.
But you are welcomed as a foreigner.
So yeah,
it's nice to have a foreigner here.
Yeah.
Look, Ahmed, he comes from Egypt.
exactly.
We like him, we welcome him.
Yeah.
But he's not one of us.
Yeah, and here when this one is like, yeah, he's welcomed because he's a foreigner and it's nice and so on and so forth. But then this second part of the sentence appears, but he is not one of us. When it comes out, all right, yes, there is then this pressure. There is this I wouldn't call it even just a pressure. It's a stress. It's an anxiety. It's the idea of that your world can be collapsed because you do not belong here. All right. But this really rarely happens. And maybe that's why I don't have like a general kind of, no, I can say like, oh no, in Russia here you don't feel this pressure or you feel free and so on and so forth, right? But no, I think it just depends on the situation. Maybe I will feel it later. I don't know. I mean, maybe I will have kind of a definitive answer later because I have just been here for 6 years. And this is a very nice thing. Thought here is that most of the people that I met who are immigrants in Russia, they have been here for more than 10 years. And I met this guy who lives right now in Kazan, and he told me that he has been here in Russia for 25 years, and he has never left home. And I asked him why. He told me,
you left home and says his apartment.
No, I mean, he never left home to his home country. He's from Turkey, and he told me I never even thought about the idea of going home. I just felt like this is my place. And for some reason, it's not only him, even my close friend, one of my very close friends, he is Egyptian as well, who lives in Russia for more than 10 years. He became Russian. He received the citizenship. And he also goes to his home country, to Egypt, also not, I mean, he goes there rarely as well, only because of business or only because of business trips or whatever, and so on and so forth. But it feels like the people who come to Russia, they stay longer. And the 6 years that I have been here, all right, interrupted by this 2 months that I have been in Egypt, but whatever, all right, it seems like it's a young age of being an immigrant in Russia in order to actually have a definitive answer about whether the foreigner feels pressured or not about becoming Russian. All right, I feel like.
But okay, but I just want to situate Russia in this binary of United States where you can assimilate and there is a pressure, and the UK where you cannot assimilate, there is no pressure. So in Russia, you think you can assimilate. An example of your friends is people did assimilate.
Yeah.
And for that reason, there is a pressure. It's closer to the United States in this sense.
I'm really not sure that it's closer to the United States because I don't know. I mean, okay, in the United States, you have to have a representation for food and so on, and your community. Yeah. I'm not sure that actually foreigners and the immigrants who come to Russia, they can have a community.
But they don't have communities, so many of them.
Many. I mean, I'm talking about the people from what they call them, Dalny Zarubezh, or what they call. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I'm talking about not
from Soviet.
Not from the post-Soviet Union countries. They still don't have communities. I don't think that I can say, oh, this is the Egyptian community. I know where they are and so on and so forth. Maybe they are still building themselves, but I know a lot of people have been here for more than 10 years, but they are just not interested in that. I think that this is part of the fact is that the type of immigrant who comes to the United States is completely different from the immigrant who comes to Russia. The ones who come to Russia might actually come in order to settle down. The ones who go to United States might just to go to try, and then they are being pressured in order to become American. All right. But the ones who come to Russia, they really want to settle down. Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't want to generalize here. But it's really the type of immigrants is just different, right? The ones who consciously go to Russia, right? It's different from the one who go to America, because Russia is not branding itself. Also one of the things. Russia is not saying, come, right? Or here it's the Russian dream. There is no this thing about the Russian dream. But America, there is American dream. Come and become an American. It's the free, and so on and so forth, right? But in Russia, no. The ones who come to Russia are completely different from the one who go to America.
The last thing I think we might discuss right now is how you can influence a country. This is an important, I think, lesson that I learned. And that's, I think, why I'm very happy that I returned. Right? I'm happy that I lived abroad for 10 years, right? But I'm happy that I returned because when you live abroad, there is only so much you could do in terms of influencing the foreign country, right? If you look at Russians living in the United States, some of them make a lot of money. Some of them don't make so much money, but none of them is actually in any position of influence in a sense of doing something that would change America somehow. The biggest thing they can do, they can invent some technology, sell it, and it will influence America in the sense that everybody now orders food through some application that was developed by some Russian IT guy. But that's the end of it. That's the limit of that, right? And I was exactly, I mean, when you go to do an academic career abroad, you know that you can become the chair of the department, and this is pretty much it. You can never become a provost, a dean, a president of a university. There is some kind of glass ceiling. These positions are usually taken by Americans. I mean, not just American citizens, because you can become an American citizen, but people who are kind of from America.
Yes.
I don't know how it works, right? Because officially, of course, there are no regulations, but it just so happens that Russians are not allowed into political domain. And not just Russians. I don't think there are many Germans there, or Chinese for that matter. So I think for me, what I discovered when I came back to Russia, especially when I started working at Skolkovo, is that here you can make a difference much more, not just with the students you teach, but in terms of the institutional structure, of how universities work, things like that.
All right. So this was today's talk with Andrey. Thanks so much for coming in today. And if you have any comments, questions, anything, just you can, of course, you are more than welcome to write to us. And we will appreciate your like, subscribe, comments, and so on and so forth. So thank you so much, Andrey.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So this was it. This was the Breakout. See you. Hello, everybody. This is Ahmed, and this was the first season of the podcast, The Breakout, here at SAS. We met a lot of our students, and they discussed too many things that are not connected to one another, and also maybe not connected even to their studies, but they are things that they are interested in. And we will continue working, and we will continue having discussions, but this time we will have discussions with our SAS professors. And we will also be talking about different things. Maybe they are connected to one another. I don't know, we will see. But we would like to thank you for your support, following us for the past 2 months. And we are looking forward to your comments, suggestions, and of course your likes and your subscribes. And please stay tuned for the next season of the Breakout podcast. See you.